The first time I saw the president's broadcast, I thought somebody had left a VHS tape running too long. You know that look, faces bleeding into static, voices dragging like they're underwater. Made sense, honestly. Everything felt broken by then. The power kept cutting out, our ventilation system wheezed like it had asthma, and we'd all been wound tighter than guitar strings after 3 weeks of sirens and lockdowns. Turns out it wasn't a malfunction at all. Our bunker's main screen crackled to life around 6 p.m., and there he was, pale as hospital sheets, sweating through what looked like his best suit. The American flag hung behind him, but even that seemed wrong somehow. Faded, like someone had left it in the sun too long. His mouth moved, but for a second no sound came out. Then his voice cracked through the speakers. Code Crimson. Effective immediately. Obey all instructions. That was it. No explanation. No context. Just those 7 words, delivered like he was reading someone else's grocery list. I was sitting next to Marlo when it happened. She had this way of keeping her face blank during the official broadcasts, but I caught her eyebrow twitch. Just barely. Never heard of Code Crimson, she murmured. Neither had anyone else, apparently. Reynolds, this wiry guy who used to install security systems before the world went to hell, leaned forward in his chair. That's not a real protocol. I've seen every emergency classification they have. Maybe it's new, someone suggested from the back. Maybe it's bullshit, Reynolds shot back. The screen went dark. Then, exactly 1 hour later, it happened again. Same suit, same flag, same 7 words. The president's hand twitched at the exact same moment. His voice cracked in the exact same place. I started paying closer attention after that. By the 3rd replay, I was taking notes on the back of a ration wrapper. The president blinked at 003, 007, and 012. His left eye twitched at 009. He shifted his weight from his left foot to his right at exactly 015. Every single time. It's a recording, I told Marlo during dinner. We were crammed around these metal tables that looked like they'd been stolen from a high school cafeteria, 38 people trying to pretend we weren't all slowly losing our minds. She pushed her powdered eggs around her tray without eating them. Recordings don't usually run on the hour for days straight. This one does. She gave me this look, not disagreeing exactly, but warning me to keep my voice down. The guards didn't like it when we talked too much during the broadcasts. Hell, they didn't like it when we talked much at all. The 4th day, something changed. I was studying the president's face during the 3 p.m. broadcast, counting his blinks when I saw it. Just for a frame, maybe less, there was someone else behind him. A shadow in the reflection of what looked like a monitor or window. Tall, thin, wearing what might have been a dark suit. The thing that made my skin crawl wasn't the shadow itself. It was the way its head was tilted. Too far to the right, like someone had grabbed it and twisted until the neck should have snapped. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Marlo. That night, I couldn't sleep. Our bunks were stacked 3 high, and mine was in the middle. Close enough to hear Peterson snoring above me. Close enough to smell the fear sweat coming off Martinez below. The air recycling system hummed constantly, but it never quite masked the other sounds. Whispers. Footsteps in the corridors. The occasional muffled sob from someone who thought everyone else was asleep. During the 4 a.m. broadcast, I saw the shadow again. Clear this time. It wasn't just standing there. It was mimicking the president. When he raised his hand, it raised its hand. When he turned his head slightly to the left, the shadow turned too. Perfect synchronization, like they were connected by invisible wires. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making noise. The next morning, I cornered Marlo in the bathroom. It was the only place without cameras, or at least, the only place where we hoped there weren't cameras. You need to watch the next broadcast, I whispered. Really watch. Behind him. Her face went carefully neutral. Behind him what? There's something there. Someone. I struggled for words that wouldn't make me sound completely insane. It's moving with him. Like it's controlling him. Marlo studied my face in the cracked mirror above the sink. I looked like hell, we all did after a month underground, but there was something else in my eyes. Something that made her nod slowly. I'll watch, she said. The 6 p.m. broadcast came. I sat in my usual spot, 2 rows back from the main screen, but this time I wasn't looking at the president. I was watching Marlo. Her expression didn't change during the message. Not even a flicker. But when the screen went dark, she caught my eye and gave the smallest possible nod. She'd seen it too. That night, she slipped a torn piece of paper into my hand. I waited until lights out to read it. Don't talk about this. Not here. They're listening. The next few days blurred together. Same routine, same broadcasts, same growing sense that we were all slowly suffocating in recycled air and institutional paranoia. But now I knew Marlo was watching too, and somehow that made it bearable. The shadow became clearer with each broadcast. Not just a reflection anymore, but a presence. I started to make out details, the way its fingers moved, the angle of its shoulders, the suggestion of a face that wasn't quite there. On day 35, Reynolds stood up during the evening broadcast. "This is fake," he announced to the room. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "That's not really the president. That's not even a real broadcast." The guards moved fast. Two of them grabbed Reynolds by the arms while a third activated some kind of shock device. Reynolds screamed, a sound that cut right through you, and then went limp. They dragged him out through the service door. We never saw him again. After that, nobody talked during the broadcasts. Hell, nobody talked much at all. But I kept watching, and the shadow kept getting stronger. On day 40, I realized the president hadn't blinked in over a week. His eyes stayed wide and glassy, staring straight ahead like he was looking through all of us. His lips moved, but they were just slightly out of sync with the audio now, like a badly dubbed foreign film. The shadow was solid enough that I could see its suit jacket, its tie, even the suggestion of shoes. It stood directly behind the president, hands resting on his shoulders like a father posing with his son. Except fathers don't usually have faces made of static. Marlo started leaving me more notes. Always just a few words, always hidden where only I would find them. "It's getting stronger. Don't react. They're watching us watch." On day 43, during the morning broadcast, something new happened. The president's eyes flicked sideways. Just for a second, just long enough for me to see the terror in them. His mouth formed a word that wasn't part of the script. "Help." Then his expression went blank again, and he continued with the usual message. But I knew what I'd seen. And from the way Marlo's hands clenched in her lap, so had she. Whatever was wearing the president's face like a mask, the real man was still in there somewhere. Still aware. Still screaming. The thought kept me awake for the next 3 nights. By day 45, 5 more people had vanished. Their bunks were stripped clean, their names crossed off the roster, their meal trays redistributed. The guards had stopped bothering with explanations. They'd just point to the service door and say, "Processing." Nobody asked what kind of processing. I started keeping a count on the underside of my bunk, scratching marks with a piece of broken metal I'd found in the bathroom. We'd started with 38 people. Now we were down to 31. The shadow in the broadcasts had grown solid enough that I could see its breathing. If it was breathing, the movement was too regular, too mechanical, like someone inflating and deflating a balloon on a timer. And sometimes, I swear this is true, sometimes I caught it looking directly at the camera. Not at the president, not at the flag, but at us. At me. During the evening broadcast on day 47, Marlo did something I'd never seen her do before. She smiled. Not at me, not at anyone in the room. At the screen. At the thing behind the president that was pretending to be human. It was a small smile, barely visible, but in that moment I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. Marlo had a plan, and whatever it was going to get us all killed. The broadcast ended. The screen went dark, and for the first time since we'd been sealed in that concrete tomb, I found myself looking forward to what came next. Even if it killed me, Marlo's plan started with silence. Not the kind we'd been practicing, that desperate, teeth-clenched quiet that came from pure terror. This was different, deliberate. She taught me how to watch without seeing, how to sit without being present, how to become invisible even when 30 pairs of eyes were staring at the same screen. "It feeds on attention," she whispered during one of our bathroom meetings on day 50. "Every time someone reacts, every gasp, every flinch, every moment of fear, it gets stronger." I thought about Reynolds, about his defiant shout before they dragged him away, about the way the shadow had seemed more solid the next day, like his anger had been converted into mass. So we starve it. We try. But there was something else in her voice. Something she wasn't telling me. The shadow had evolved beyond anything I could have imagined. By day 52, it wasn't just mimicking the president, it was improving on him. When the president's hand shook with what looked like palsy, the shadow's hand moved with surgical precision. When the president's voice cracked, the shadow's lips moved with perfect articulation. It was learning to be more human than the human it was wearing. During that morning's broadcast, I noticed something new. The president's suit had changed. Yesterday, it had been navy blue with a red tie. Today, it was charcoal gray with blue. But here's the thing. I'd been taking notes for weeks now, and he'd never changed clothes before. Not once. I checked my scratches under the bunk that night. 47 days, same suit every time. Until now. Marlo found my notes during the next morning's head count. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look that could have melted steel. That afternoon, she slipped me a new note. They're not just recording him anymore. They're rebuilding him. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. If the shadow could change the president's appearance, what else could it change? His words? His message? His purpose? Day 54 brought our answer. The evening broadcast started normally. Same presidential seal, same flag, same opening static. But when the president appeared, his face was wrong. Not obviously wrong, you had to look close to see it. His nose was slightly narrower. His hairline had shifted back maybe half an inch. His eye color had gone from brown to hazel. And when he spoke, the message was different. Code Crimson remains in effect. New protocols are being implemented. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will be processed. The word processed seemed to echo in the cramped common room longer than it should have. I felt everyone's shoulders tense at once. After the broadcast ended, nobody moved for a full minute. We just sat there, digesting what we'd heard. When the guards finally dismissed us, the shuffle to the exit was quieter than usual. That night, Martinez didn't come back from the bathroom. His bunk stayed empty, sheets still rumpled from where he'd been sleeping. When I asked one of the guards about it the next morning, she just smiled and said, "Processed." We were down to 29. The changes accelerated after that. Every broadcast brought a slightly different president. Sometimes his jaw was broader, sometimes his shoulders were straighter, sometimes his voice carried an accent that hadn't been there before. It was like watching someone adjust a photograph one pixel at a time, gradually transforming it into something else entirely. By day 60, I wasn't sure we were looking at the president at all anymore. The shadow had stopped pretending to be background interference. It stood beside the podium now, clearly visible, wearing what looked like an expensive black suit. Its face was still static, still that horrible visual noise where features should be, but it had presence, weight, authority, and it was speaking, not out loud. Its mouth didn't move, assuming it had a mouth. But I could hear it anyway, a low whisper that seemed to come from inside my own skull. Soon, it said during the afternoon broadcast on day 61. Very soon. I glanced around the room. From the way everyone had gone rigid, I knew they were hearing it too. Marlo's hand found mine under the table. Her palm was ice cold. That night, she didn't wait for lights out. She crawled into my bunk the moment the guards finished their rounds, pressing her mouth against my ear so her words wouldn't carry. "It's not just feeding on us," she breathed. "It's replacing us. The broadcasts aren't about control anymore. They're about conversion. Converting us into what?" Her grip on my arm tightened. "Into it. Into copies of it. That's what happened to the people who were processed. They're not dead. They're somewhere else, being hollowed out and refilled." The thought made my stomach turn. I pictured Reynolds, Martinez, all the others, trapped in some nightmare version of the bunker, while that thing wore their faces like masks. "How do you know all this?" She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, because I've been having dreams. We all have. Dreams where we're standing in a room full of screens, watching ourselves, except we're not ourselves anymore. We're empty, and it's standing behind us, teaching us how to be human. I'd been having those dreams. We all had. But I'd assumed they were just stress, just the natural result of being trapped underground for 2 months with recycled air and artificial light. "The dreams are real, aren't they?" "They're additions," Marlo said. "It's testing us, seeing which of us will make the best shells." Day 62 brought a new horror. During the morning broadcast, The not president looked directly into the camera and smiled. Not the kind of smile politicians practice in mirrors. This was something else. Something that had learned what smiles were supposed to look like, but had never understood why humans made them. The selection process will begin soon, he said. Those chosen should consider it an honor. The shadow moved closer to the podium. Its static face turned toward the camera, and for one impossible moment, I felt like it was looking directly at me. 3 more people vanished that day. Their names were crossed off the roster before dinner, their possessions redistributed, their bunks stripped clean. We were down to 26. The dreams got worse. More vivid, more detailed. I started seeing the room Marlowe had described, walls lined with screens, each one showing a different version of the bunker. In some, we were all still there. In others, we were gone, replaced by things that looked like us but moved wrong, spoke wrong, existed wrong. And always, in the center of the room, the shadow stood watching, evaluating, choosing. On day 65, it chose me. I was sitting in my usual spot during the evening broadcast when the not president's eyes found mine through the screen. He raised one finger and pointed directly at the camera. "You," he said. The word hit me like a physical blow. Every nerve in my body screamed at once, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Like a door opening in a room I didn't know existed. The shadow smiled. I couldn't see its mouth, but I felt the smile anyway, cold and hungry and patient. I managed not to react. Barely. But I knew it was too late. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt myself being pulled toward that room full of screens, toward the thing that was learning to wear my face. Marlowe knew something had changed. She kept glancing at me during breakfast, her eyes full of questions she couldn't ask out loud. During our next bathroom meeting, she grabbed my shoulders and stared directly into my eyes. "It picked you," she said. I nodded. "When?" "Last night." She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she pulled out a scrap of paper and wrote quickly, "Tonight. Be ready." "Ready for what?" She tore up the paper and flushed the pieces. "To fight back." That evening, during the 6 p.m. broadcast, Marlowe did something I'd never seen anyone do since Reynolds. She stood up. Not aggressively, not shouting. She just rose from her chair, calm as anything, and looked directly at the screen. The not president stopped mid-sentence. The shadow turned its static face toward the camera. "You're not real," Marlowe said quietly. "And you're not in charge." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The lights flickered. Through the speakers came a sound I'd never heard before, like static, but angrier, hungrier. The guards moved toward her, but something made them stop. Maybe it was the way the air itself seemed to thicken, or maybe it was the sound coming from the screen. That terrible, ravenous static that made your teeth ache and your vision blur. Marlowe didn't flinch. She kept her eyes locked on the shadow behind the podium. "I know what you are," she continued, "and I know what you want. But you can't have it." The not president's face contorted, features shifting like clay in an earthquake. When he spoke, his voice was layered with that horrible static sound. "You will be processed." "No," Marlowe said. "I won't." She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. At first I thought it was a pen, but then I saw the way light caught it. Sharp light, blade light. Before anyone could stop her, she drew the makeshift knife across her palm. Blood welled up, dark in the fluorescent light. "You feed on fear," she said, letting the blood drip onto the floor. "On submission. On the living." The shadow recoiled. Actually recoiled like her blood was acid. "But you can't digest death," Marlowe continued. "You can't process what's already gone." That's when I understood. Her plan wasn't to starve the shadow or outsmart it. Her plan was to poison it. Before I could move, before I could stop her, she pressed the blade against her throat. "Everyone who's been chosen," she called out to the room. "Everyone who's been marked. You have a choice." The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard the sound of metal hitting flesh. When emergency lighting kicked in, Marlowe was on the floor, blood spreading in a perfect circle around her head. And through the speakers, the shadow was screaming. Not the electronic static from before. This was something organic, something that sounded almost human. Almost. The screen flickered and died. For the first time in 66 days, we sat in silence that wasn't broken by the hourly broadcast. But I knew it wasn't over. The shadow was hurt, weakened, but not dead. And I was still chosen. As I knelt beside Marlowe's body, I felt that familiar pull toward the room full of screens. Stronger now, more insistent. But there was something else. Something that hadn't been there before. Her voice, whisper quiet in the back of my mind. The blood remembers. Use it. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in Marlowe's blood from trying to stop her bleeding. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. The shadow wanted to hollow me out and wear me like a suit. But it was going to get more than it bargained for. Because now I knew the secret. You can't digest a poison that wants to poison you back. Marlowe's blood was still warm on my hands when the emergency lights died. Not flickered, died. The kind of death that comes with finality, with the last breath leaving a body. For the first time in 66 days, we sat in absolute darkness. No hum of fluorescence. No camera whirs. No static from dead screens. Just silence, and the sound of my own breathing, and the wet spread of blood seeping into concrete. I pressed my fingers to Marlowe's throat, feeling for a pulse I knew wouldn't be there. Her skin was already cooling, but something else was warming, the blood on my hands. It wasn't just wet anymore. It was moving, flowing up my fingers like liquid mercury, leaving trails that glowed faintly in the dark. The pull toward that room of screens intensified, but it felt different now. Corrupted, like trying to swallow something that was swallowing you back. Around me, bodies shifted in the darkness. Whispers started, not human whispers, but that familiar static hiss. The hollow ones were stirring, and their voices were syncing up, harmonizing into something that might have been words if words could rust. Process, process, process. I needed light. Any light. My fingers found the emergency kit mounted under the nearest bench. Standard bunker equipment they'd somehow never confiscated. Inside, flares, medical supplies, and a hand-crank flashlight. I cranked furiously. The weak beam cut through the darkness, revealing a scene from hell. The hollow ones were standing, all 12 of them, arranged in a perfect circle around Marlowe's body. Their eyes reflected the light like animals, pupils wide and unblinking. Their mouths moved in unison, shaping that static whisper. But they weren't looking at her. They were looking at me. One of them, a woman who used to be called Janet before she was processed, spoke in a voice like grinding gears. You carry her now. I backed against the wall, flashlight beam shaking. I don't understand. Another one, the boy who'd been the shadow's first mouthpiece, tilted his head. Blood still crusted the corners of his mouth where his jaw had cracked 2 wide days ago. She poisoned herself, he said. To poison it. But poison needs a host to spread. The realization hit me like ice water. Marlowe hadn't just cut her throat to deny the shadow her living fear. She'd made herself toxic, and then made sure I'd absorbed that toxicity through her blood. She'd turned me into a weapon. The hollow ones stepped closer, their circle tightening. But something was wrong with their coordination. Usually they moved like a single organism, each part perfectly synchronized. Now they stuttered, some faster than others, some taking steps that led nowhere. The poison was already working. You feel it, the boy said, but his voice cracked halfway through, static bleeding into the words. The burning. She burns inside you now. He was right. There was a heat spreading through my chest, following the paths where Marlowe's blood had touched my skin. Not painful, more like the warmth you feel when stepping out of cold rain into sunlight. Comforting, but also transformative. I thought about what she'd whispered in my mind after she died. The blood remembers. What did it remember? All her resistance. Every moment she'd refused to react. Every time she'd helped someone else stay quiet. Every scrap of defiance she'd hoarded like ammunition. It was all there, dissolved in her blood, now mixing with mine. The boy took another step forward. His skin rippled, something moving underneath like parasites swimming in flesh. Give it to us, he demanded. The corruption. We can cleanse it. I almost laughed. You want me to let you process me? We want you to join willingly. It will hurt less. That's when I realized the shadow's first mistake. It assumed I'd be afraid of pain. I'd been afraid of everything else, the broadcasts, the disappearances, the slow dissolution of reality. But pain? Pain was something I understood. Pain was honest. And right now, the pain of Marlowe's sacrifice burning through my veins felt like the most honest thing I'd experienced in months. No, I said. The word came out steadier than I expected. The hollow ones flinched as if I'd struck them. "Then you will be taken," the boy said. But his voice was weaker now, the static more pronounced. I gripped the flashlight tighter and took a step forward. The beam caught his face fully, and I saw something impossible. Fear. Not human fear, this was older, deeper. The kind of fear that comes when a predator realizes it's become prey. "You can't take what's already been given away," I said, understanding flooding through me like electricity. The blood on my hands pulsed brighter. Marlo hadn't just poisoned herself. She'd made a choice, to die human, to die herself, to die with all her resistance intact. And by dying that way, she'd created something the shadow couldn't digest, authentic sacrifice. The hollow ones began to back away. Their perfect circle crumbled as some moved faster than others, some stumbled, some forgot which direction they were supposed to go. The boy's face contorted. She was already ours. We had already chosen her. Her death means nothing. Her death means everything, I said, because she chose it herself. I raised my bloodied hands, letting the flashlight beam catch the still glowing traces on my fingers. "And now you have to choose. Take what she gave me, or lose what you've already built." The static in his voice intensified to a shriek. "You understand nothing." "I understand enough." I pressed my palm against the nearest wall and smeared Marlo's blood across the concrete. Where it touched, the paint blistered. The cameras in the ceiling sparked. The speakers crackled with interference. "I understand you're not feeding on us anymore," I continued, moving to the next wall, spreading the poison. "You're choking on us." The boy lurched forward, but his movements were disjointed now, like a broken marionette. The other hollow ones stumbled, some falling to their knees, some pressing their hands to their temples as if fighting off a migraine. The infection was spreading. In the corner, Sarah, the woman who'd been whispering prayers, suddenly straightened. Her eyes cleared for the first time in weeks, pupils focusing on my face instead of staring through me. "I remember," she whispered. Then another voice from across the room. "I remember too." One by one, the process began to wake up. Not fully, they were still hollow, still wrong, but something human flickered behind their eyes. Something Marlo's sacrifice had rekindled. The boy screamed, but the sound was fragmenting, splitting into multiple voices that argued with each other. "Take him now." "We cannot, he is poisoned." "Then purge the poison." "We cannot, it spreads." I smiled and pressed my hands to the final wall. "Marlo," I called out to the darkness. "If you can hear me, if any part of you is still fighting in there, this is for you." I smeared the last of her blood across the concrete, completing a rough circle around the common room. The effect was immediate. Every screen in the bunker exploded at once. Every camera sparked and went dark. The speakers shrieked electronic death cries before falling silent. And in that silence, I heard something beautiful. Voices. Human voices. The processed were speaking their own names, remembering who they'd been before the hollow shells moved in. The boy collapsed, skin going gray, the thing inside him retreating like smoke escaping a broken jar. But I knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere above us, in the real world, the Shadows broadcast was still running. Still converting people into shells, still building its army of copies. Marlo's poison had bought us time, had broken its hold on our bunker, but the infection was spreading across the entire world. I looked at the others, 12 people slowly remembering how to be human, blinking in confusion as their true selves fought back to the surface. "Listen to me," I said, my voice carrying further in the dead silence than it had any right to. "We're not the only bunker. There are others, and they're all receiving the same broadcasts. The same conversion process." Sarah nodded, her voice still hoarse but gaining strength. "The radio signals. Before the bunkers sealed, there were dozens of emergency frequencies, all playing the same loop. I thought about the world above. Cities full of people watching screens, listening to voices, slowly being hollowed out and refilled. How many were already gone? How many were still fighting? How many had someone like Marlo, willing to poison herself to save the rest? "We need to get out," I said. "We need to warn people. But first, we needed to make sure the Shadow couldn't use our bunker as a staging ground anymore." I gathered the others around Marlo's body. 12 faces, human again but still marked by what they'd endured. They understood what needed to be done. Together, we pressed our hands into her blood. Let it stain our skin, mark us as poisoned goods. And together we touched every screen, every camera, every speaker in the facility. By dawn, the entire bunker was dead. Not just the electronics. The shadow's presence itself had been purged, driven out by the spreading infection of authentic human sacrifice. When we finally broke through the sealed entrance, using tools from the maintenance room and pure desperate strength, we emerged into a world transformed. The sky was the color of old blood. The air tasted of copper and ozone. And in the distance, carried on the wind, we could hear the sound of broadcasts, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all playing variations of the same message. Code Crimson remains in effect. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will be processed. But we also heard something else. Screaming. Not the electronic shriek of the shadow, human screaming. People fighting back. People refusing to comply. The poison was spreading. Marlowe's sacrifice had done more than save our bunker. It had created a template, a way to fight back that could be replicated. Every person who chose death over conversion became another source of poison. Every act of authentic resistance made the shadow's digestion a little more difficult. We had work to do. I wiped Marlowe's blood from my hands onto a piece of concrete rubble, then carefully wrapped it in cloth. A seed of resistance to carry to the next bunker, the next group of survivors. The shadow thought it was building an army of copies. Instead, it was going to get an epidemic of authenticity. As we walked into the poisoned dawn, I could still feel Marlowe's presence in my blood, her voice echoing in the back of my mind. Not yet. And she was right. The shadow wasn't finished. But neither were we. The poisoned sky stretched above us like an infected wound, copper red and weeping ash. Behind us, the bunker entrance gaped open, a concrete mouth we'd torn our way through with maintenance tools and desperation. Ahead lay what remained of Cincinnati, though the skyline was wrong. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, their glass faces reflecting broadcasts that no longer needed screens. The reflections themselves had become the medium. Sarah stumbled beside me, still whispering fragments of prayers mixed with her own name. The other 11 survivors spread out in a loose formation, each carrying a piece of cloth stained with Marlowe's blood. We'd learned to wrap the fragments carefully. Too much exposure to bare skin, and the burning became unbearable. Too little, and the shadow's influence crept back in. The broadcasts hung in the air around us like audio mirages, not from speakers or radios, but from the city itself. Every broken window pane, every puddle of standing water, every shard of glass became a transmitter. Code Crimson remains in effect. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will be processed. But underneath the official loop, I caught fragments of something else. Screams. Please. And occasionally, defiantly. Not yet. The poison was spreading, just as Marlowe had intended. There, Sarah pointed east, toward what had been the government district. A cluster of intact buildings rose from the wreckage, their surfaces gleaming with an oily sheen. The central broadcast station. If we can. A figure stepped from behind an overturned car. It wore my face. Not a hollow shell or processed copy. This was the reflection I'd seen in the screens, the double that had nodded back at me. But standing here in open air, it looked wrong in ways that made my vision blur. Too tall, joints bending backward, skin that shifted between textures like badly rendered video. It smiled with my smile, but the teeth were too sharp. "You're early," it said in my voice. We weren't expecting escape for another 47 hours. The other survivors raised their improvised weapons, broken rebar, jagged concrete, a fire axe someone had salvaged. But I held up a hand. "Don't react," I said. "It's trying to bait us." The thing wearing my face laughed. "Clever. She taught you well." It glanced at the bloodied cloth in my hand. "But did she teach you what happens when the poison runs out?" Cold settled in my stomach. Marlowe's blood had been finite. Already, the glow on the fabric was dimming, the warmth fading from my veins. "You're afraid," I said, testing. "I'm practical." The double circled us slowly, each step perfectly silent despite the rubble underfoot. "Do you know how many bunkers we've processed?" 734. "How many survivors reached the surface?" 12 groups, all of them with their little poison samples, their fragments of resistance. It stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could see my own eyes reflected in its, except the pupils were wrong, too deep, like looking into wells. Care to guess what happened to them? I felt the others wavering behind me. Sarah's prayers grew louder. Someone's breathing quickened. The double smile widened. They burned out. The poison consumed them from within. And when they collapsed, screaming, begging for relief, we offered them a choice. Process willingly, or die as they were. Most chose processing. You're lying. Am I? It gestured to the broken city around us. Look at your salvation. Count the screams. How many voices do you hear fighting back? I listened. The defiant cries were there, scattered through the audio landscape, but they were fading. One by one, the not yet chants dissolved into static, then silence. The double leaned closer. The poison works for approximately 6 hours and 43 minutes. After that, the host experiences cascading organ failure unless. It paused, savoring the moment. Unless they accept processing to stop the pain. My hands trembled. The burning in my chest had shifted, becoming sharper, more jagged, like swallowing broken glass. Marlo knew, it continued. She knew the blood would kill you. But she gambled you'd spread it to enough screens, enough cameras, enough of us before it did. A noble suicide bombing. I felt the group behind me fracturing. 2 of the survivors dropped their weapons, falling to their knees as the realization hit them. How long? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. The double checked my face like reading a clock. For him, 23 minutes. For the rest of you, well, you've had less exposure. Perhaps an hour. That's when I understood the real trap. Marlo's plan hadn't been suicide at all. It had been murder. She'd killed us all to save the world. But as I looked at the thing wearing my face, gloating over our approaching deaths, I realized something else. Something that made me want to laugh despite the fire in my lungs. It was afraid of the poison for a reason. You know what I think? I said, stepping closer to my double. I think Marlo didn't just poison herself. She poisoned the entire network. Every copy, every reflection, every piece of you that touched her blood. The smile faltered. I think that's why you're out here talking instead of just taking us. You can't process what you can't digest. And right now, we're indigestible. The double's face rippled, features shifting like water disturbed. Temporary. The poison will burn out. The host will die. The network will heal. Maybe, I said. Or maybe we don't wait for the poison to kill us. I pulled out the emergency flare from the kit, its red tip already primed. Maybe we spread it faster. The double's eyes widened, my eyes, but wrong, too bright. You would burn the entire city. To stop you? Yes. You would kill thousands of innocents. I thought about the figures we'd seen walking the streets. The hollow ones, the processed, the copies wearing stolen faces. They're already dead. You just haven't told them yet. The double stepped back. For the first time since this began, it looked uncertain. Besides, I continued, thumb hovering over the flare's ignition strip. You said it yourself. The poison burns out in 6 hours. But fires. I smiled with teeth that felt suddenly too sharp. Fires spread. I struck the flare. Red light exploded across the ruins, and everywhere it touched, every piece of glass, every reflective surface, the broadcasts began to scream. Not the electronic static I'd grown used to, but actual screaming. The sound of something vast and alien experiencing pain for the first time. The double clutched its head, my features melting and reforming as if the face couldn't decide which version to wear. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. I touched the flare to the bloodied cloth in my hand. It caught like gasoline. The flame raced up my arm, but instead of burning, it felt cool, cleansing. The fire was consuming the poison, yes, but it was also consuming something else. The shadow's hold on this place, on us, on everything it had touched. The double shrieked and lunged for me. I let it. When its hands closed around my throat, the flame jumped to its skin. It screamed as its stolen features began to melt, revealing something underneath that hurt to look at. Not because it was monstrous, but because it was nothing. A gap in the world shaped like a person. Burn, I whispered. And it did. The fire spread from my double to the other figures emerging from the ruins. Copies of Sarah, of the boy, of faces I'd never seen, but that looked familiar anyway. One by one, they ignited, their false flesh peeling away to reveal the emptiness beneath. Behind us, the other survivors were changing too. Not processing, the opposite. The hollow shells were cracking, and something human was clawing its way out. Sarah grabbed my shoulder, her grip strong again, real again. "The broadcast station," she said. "If we can reach it while the fire's spreading, we can burn out the source," I finished. It would mean walking into the heart of the shadow's power, into a building that was probably more broadcast than concrete by now, where reality bent around the signal and the air itself might be processed. But Marlowe's fire was still burning in my veins, and I could feel her certainty like armor around my thoughts. We ran toward the government district, our footsteps echoing in streets that had learned to whisper back. Behind us, the fire spread from reflection to reflection, leaping between broken windows like electricity between synapses. The shadow's empire was burning, and we were going to make sure it burned completely. As we ran, I thought I heard Marlowe's voice one more time, carried on the poisoned wind. Not yet, but soon. The broadcast station loomed ahead, its towers piercing the infected sky like syringes full of static. Time to inject it with something else. Time to finish what she'd started.